So, before I begin talking about today's lesson on Loevinger's stages of ego development, I have a couple things to tell you. Firstly, is that right now as I film this, it is early morning, 4th of July, and my mom's in the kitchen preparing food for tonight, where we have a whole bunch of family getting together for a barbecue. So if you hear kitchen sounds, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but I hear it, so just wanted to let you know. Hopefully it's nothing too grating. Secondly, I wanted to show off what I did with my nails. So, I don't know how well you can tell, but, try and focus it. Come on. No, not focusing. Oh well. And then on this hand I did the same thing, but like, each one is like a little tentacle, and then the thumbs are like the heads. So when you do that, it's supposed to look like a squid or an octopus. Anyway, that's just something I did that I'm kind of proud of, and that was my mom. Needed some help in the kitchen, but anyway, now that I've told her that I'm filming, hopefully she won't disturb me till I'm done. But yes, so I have written down here, it's called Loevinger's Stages of Ego Development, and I have all of the stages, so I'm just going to read those out to you guys. Unfortunately, I tried to look for some sort of like interesting picture or something visually interesting that I could bring into it, but it kind of gets hard. But let me see. Maybe I can try and demonstrate a couple of points with my little octopods later, but yeah, so basically Loevinger's stages of ego development sounds super fancy in like sciencey, psychological, whatever, but it's actually just a way of explaining the development of a person's personality. And with most psychological phases of development, it'll mention like, when you're at this age, you do this. When you're at this age, you do this. So like, when you're 1 or 2, you learn how to talk. When you're, 3 or 4, you start dealing with attachment, and, kid goes to preschool and has to deal with being without their parents for a few hours to a full day, depending on where they start going. At, when you're in puberty, that happens, and it's very dependent on how old the kid is. And this is a little bit different. So the earlier phases are very, you can very much tell when I describe them, like, oh, well, I've seen kids doing that at about this age. But the later phases, very few people actually reach. So most people actually stop their ego development. I don't know what my hair is doing here. Most people stop at about around the 3rd, 4th, or 5th stage, depending on their lot in life. And very few people will go beyond that. And there are 9, I think? Yeah, there are 9 total stages. And very, very few people get to the last few stages, which is why it becomes very hard to explain those to people, because it becomes difficult to comprehend sometimes phases that are above your own. But I will try very hard to sort of describe the differences, and hopefully you guys can, I'll see if I can come up with some good examples, but yeah, there you go. So The first stage is called pre-social, and that's the earliest infancy. So, as the term goes, pre-social. This is before they're having any sort of real social interaction. They cannot really... They don't have an actual real ego at this point, so more on the whole ego idea. This is sort of loosely based off of one of Freud's ideas, where all people have what's called an id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is sort of your very base needs, like animalistic urges, like I need to eat, I'm scared, I need to run, that sort of thing. The superego is sort of society around you, like you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And the ego, which is ego development, is what sort of consoles the two. So this whole series of development is about the constant struggle between the sort of inner self and society. But again, at the pre-social stage, they don't actually have a real ego. It's pretty much just the id at that point. It's just, they're crying because they're tired, they're crying because they're hungry, they're crying because they need their diaper changed. And that's pretty much it. And beyond that, it's just whatever they immediately need. So a baby might have certain ideas like, I can't sleep without, my blankie or my stuffed toy. But again, that's an immediate need. They can't think of that ahead of time. So if they are forced to, if, say, they lost their blankie or their blankie's fallen on the floor, then they'll sit there and cry until they get what they need. And then, okay, now I have my blankie, I can go to sleep. And that's part of the object association that they learn. So they're learning associations. They're learning that, I go to sleep when I'm in, my crib with the blankie and the stuffed animals and the pillows. And when I'm in my high chair, I get food. And, when I'm in the playroom, I play with my toys. And also, they learn about symbiotic relationships. So they're slowly starting to learn, mostly with their parents, about, and, if they have any older siblings, they'll learn that, okay, maybe mommy and daddy will give me food. Big brother or sister will play with me, and that's sort of what they get out of which people. The second phase is the impulsive phase, and that's sort of around the young toddler age. And here they are starting to grow their sense of self, so they're developing their ego. And this leads to a lot of egocentrism, and they sort of live exclusively in the present. So, it's sort of whatever they want and whatever they want now. They won't really think to the future that often. And this reminds me of a study that was done where they would put a kid in a room with a marshmallow on a plate. And the adult would leave the room, and they would say, I'm going to leave you here, and in 5 minutes I'm going to come back and you can have 5 marshmallows. They would leave, and most of the kids, of the young toddlers in this phase, would have a very hard time not eating that marshmallow. And so the idea was, like, if that kid ate the marshmallow, they can't get 5 marshmallows later, but if they leave it be, then the researcher would come back and give them 4 more marshmallows, so that they would have 5 marshmallows, basically. And, yeah, so impulsive, and they live in the present. They can't think about, oh, well, I'll have more later, so I'll save this. No, they want it now. And their ideas of good and bad are starting to form in relation to themselves. So if my needs are met, that is good. If my needs are not met, that is bad. So if they want to play with a toy and they're not allowed to, that's bad. And if someone gives them a new thing, that's good. and their ideas of rewarding and punishing others is based on who's nice to them and who's mean to them. So you can see this a lot with toddlers, with older siblings, is, they think that, let's say that the toddler's playing with a toy and it's time for dinner and they need to put down the toy, but the toddler's not putting down the toy. So an older sibling comes and takes away the toy. The toddler might go tell on the older sibling and say, you should punish my big brother or sister because they took away my toy. Or depending on the kid, they might feel, if it was the reverse, where the toddler wanted something and the big brother or sister gave it to them, they would feel like their big brother or sister should be rewarded for good behavior. So it's all based on what they want and need. They haven't quite figured out how to work in other people's wants and needs yet. So the third stage is the self-protective stage, which is in young childhood, sometimes late toddlerhood. And this is when they're starting to learn morals, and they're starting to control their impulses, so it's not constantly, I want this all the time. And they're also starting to learn blame, but the thing is they will never blame themselves. They will learn the idea of something went wrong, it's your fault, it's their fault, it's her fault, it's his fault. And although they are starting to learn morals, they don't quite have a full grasp on it. So their idea of morals means don't get caught. So if you're not allowed to eat cookies before dinner, and they're eating cookies before dinner, it's okay until they get caught. It's getting caught that's bad, not the act itself necessarily. And the whole idea that, again, it's never their fault, it's always someone else's fault. So they've learned about blame, but they still are a bit too egocentric to blame themselves. And this is one of those stages where sometimes people do get stuck in. It's one of the earliest stages that people do often get stuck in, but usually, an older kid might take a little bit too long to grow out of it, depending on how the parents raise them. If the parents will, sort of bend to them more easily, then it's going to be more likely that they take a while to get out of this phase. But older kids who get stuck in this phase may become more opportunistic and deceptive and have a sort of preoccupation with always being in control. So, you think of the bossy kids who will sort of lie to you and try and get stuff from you, and a bit stuck in this, selfish phase. The fourth phase is probably the biggest phase and the one that a lot of people do get caught in quite easily. And it's the fourth and fifth phases that I think most people get caught in, particularly people who don't, go to college and don't, usually it's what will bring you up a phase is the people around you, higher learning, and trauma. So if you haven't gone through any of that, then you're more likely to get, if you kind of have your life handed to you and you have things pretty easy, you are more likely to get stuck in one of the lower phases. But the fourth phase is, again, one of the biggest, just basically for school-age kids, up through teenagerhood, you will see this. And it's the conformist stage. And this is, people they're conforming to the social norm. The biggest idea for them is of belonging and, their friends. And they fear disapproval as opposed to punishment. So if you remember in the third stage, they just don't want to get caught doing bad things. Whereas in the fourth stage, even if they get caught doing a bad thing, it's dependent on their friend group. So if a child's friend group is very good and they're always trying to follow the rules, and they're talking in class or something and they get told off for it, they feel really bad for the disapproval that they are receiving. Regardless of if there's a punishment or what the punishment is, they feel really bad. Whereas if the friend group is more lax about rules, then they may not care about getting caught because their friends don't have that disapproval for whatever it is that they did. And here, they often don't always understand the difference between rules and norms. So to them, seeing a guy wearing makeup is just as wrong as, I don't know, doing something you're not supposed to do, like driving through a stop sign or jaywalking or something like that. They're just as wrong. Although that does sort of depend on the group that person is conforming to. So, like, with the guys wearing makeup, obviously that's, in certain circles, that is a thing. But there you go. And often people in this stage will reject and stereotype the out-group. So this is where there's a huge idea of in-group, out-group. And that's kind of its own psychological theory. But in relation to this, it's like whatever group you're in is the in-group, and people will often idealize their in-group, and whoever isn't in that group is the out-group. So if we're thinking like, I don't know, orange octopods and purple octopods, and the orange octopods have their little clique going on with all of their orange octopods, and they might, stereotype the purple octopods and say, well, purple octopods have, weird mouths and, I don't know, things hanging from their heads, and just because a lot of them do doesn't mean they all do, but the purple octopods here are the out group, and pretty much anyone who doesn't fit into this orange octopod group will be the out group. And the fifth stage is the self-aware stage, another stage that people will sort of not move beyond, because this is when, you start to feel complete, because finally you have increased self-awareness as well as self-criticism. You can sort of look at your own flaws and be like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not so good at. And this stage is raised in very late teenagerhood and sort of early adulthood. So, like, I'm going to say early years of college, last years of high school. But you're able to now imagine multiple possibilities for your life. So this works out because this is when you're deciding, what you want to do with your life. So if you're sitting and thinking and, say, trying to choose what to major in college, you can think, okay, well, if I study medicine and decide to become a doctor, I imagine this is what my life will be like. If I, decide to study law and do that, I imagine this is what my life will be like. Do I think I would make a good doctor, or do I think I would make a better lawyer? You think more about the future in this stage than you did in past stages. And you have more of a sense of who you are rather than just trying to fit in with whatever crowd that you're a part of. And another thing that happens in this stage is you're able to appreciate other people on a higher level, because there's a heightened interest in interpersonal relations here. Now that you have yourself settled and your peers all have themselves settled, it becomes more interesting to see... Stupid crow. Sorry. It becomes more interesting to see interaction between two people who have their personalities settled versus people who are both trying to fit in with the same norm. And yeah, very, very few people move beyond this stage without some sort of, like I said, higher learning or trauma going on. So stages beyond this are often belonging to people who, let's see, have been to war or have faced other sort of immense abuse or relationship trauma, or people who have, gone to college or gotten a graduate degree, PhD, or whatever. Although I do feel like perhaps this developmental phases, and it's hard to tell whether it's the way it's written or the way that things are, but I do feel like people who study this are more likely to move higher in the phases, and I don't know how much of that is because it was written by a psychologist, so of course whoever wrote this would think herself to be pretty high in one of the phases, or if it's by fact that by studying people and relationships, you begin to learn a lot from that and grow wiser because of it. But anyway, take from this what you will. The sixth stage is the conscientious stage, which tends to be achieved, like I said, in college. This is when you become more aware of your psychological development, so you can look back and think, well, when I was younger, I was trying to conform to this norm, and then I discovered that I'm better with this, and when, you can sort of apply it to yourself, and you sort of learn a bit more about the difference between rules and expectations and contingencies. So, and this helps a lot with, say, the workforce. There might be a rule that you have to submit all your paperwork by Saturday, but the actual expectation is that you submit it a couple days early. So there's that difference. That's sort of a much simpler example, but things from here on get much more cerebral and difficult to explain sometimes, so I'm trying to come up with the simplest examples that'll be understandable. And they also, develop more on their goals and ideals, both for themselves and for the world around them, that's a little bit into, politics, but they have an idea of what they want the world to be like. And at this point, responsibility and guilt is more tied to not wanting to hurt others rather than simply not wanting to get caught or not wanting to get punished. So, if we remember stage 3, it was don't get caught. Stage 4, it was no disapproval. And stage 5, I didn't quite mention, but it's still, don't get punished. Stage 6 was, you don't want to hurt others. So that's where your morals start to guide you, and, this is why you can sort of see a lot of people who may, do things that or break rules and be like, well, I didn't hurt anyone, so it's okay. Or if they don't realize that they've hurt someone, then they'll be more likely to be okay with it than if they knew that they were hurting people. They also start to they know the difference between their own self-chosen standards and manners. So they may think, okay, well, this is how I generally act. But when I'm with my family, I have to be polite. I have to act this way around them because that's, manners. Like maybe when you're home by yourself or hanging out with your friends, it's totally okay to be a bit, more slobby or, I don't know, like pick up food with your hands and stuff like that, and it's totally okay. But maybe your family is a bit more, a bit more old-fashioned, so you want to be polite and, ask, oh, can you please pass this? Whereas with your friends, you might just reach over and grab whatever it is you want. You also learn a lot more about the broader social context. And again, I think this is because it tends to be that people in this phase have gone to college or are in college, so that's part of this whole thing. But you start to, again, with the politics, you're more aware of the implications of everything. You understand the motives of others, so you can sort of see why other people do what they do a lot better, rather than just, appreciating the differences. You can understand that. And they have aspirations of achievement. These people, they want to, move up in the career ladder, or they want to sometimes get a doctorate just to get a doctorate. It's the achievement that they love. They want to be the best, like no one ever was. And they see life as presenting choices. They control their own, they feel like, I control my own destiny. Life is what I make of it and where I take it. I am in control here. Just very, very empowered. And yeah, you can see this a lot with college students and people who are early on in the workforce. Okay. From here on out, it's difficult to say when exactly people will reach these phases, because sometimes, again, it depends on where their life takes them. Sometimes it happens early after, so maybe you might reach stage 7 when you're still in college, if you're really wise and really good at that sort of thing. Or you may be stuck in stage 5 or 6 and reach stage 7 when you're old and wrinkly and, just a grandpa or grandma or something. It's very difficult to tell. But anyway, stage 7 is the individualistic stage, and this is when you start to ease into things. So if you remember, stage 6 was very, empowered, and it's my destiny, and I can control things, and having this very optimistic and goal-oriented view of the world. And this is, for the next 3 stages, they tend to slow down, and it often looks, the way I describe it, it sounds kind of like regressing, but it's not. It's sort of the whole coming at peace with everything, the sliding into an almost Buddhist monk mentality of just peace with the world around you. You don't have to achieve everything. And this is when you're starting to think more about that. It becomes less about achievement and more about the self and about others. So, you're becoming more tolerant of yourself as you are and others as they are, and recognizing individual differences, and it's like, although you're this way and I'm this way, that's totally okay. I'm not going to force you to be the way I am for any reason. And they become more okay with an understanding of complex circumstances, and sort of, again, the autonomy of themselves and others. So they can understand not just why other people do what they do, but it's fully sunk in, the whole idea of every person has their own life story. And, everyone has a reason for doing all the things that they do. Like, that, and that's kind of a big thing that I try and bring up to the people around me, but imagine, it's a bit mind-blowing, every single person. So you're sitting here watching this video right now. I have a life of my own. After this, I'm going to, go help with dinner and go sit with my family and have, lunch, dinner, and sit with my family and eat. And you guys are going to move on from this video to maybe another video. Maybe you're going to turn off the video partway through. Maybe you've already turned it off. Then you wouldn't be seeing this. I don't know. And it's a bit mind-blowing, because for you, it's every video you watch. Think about how many people took time out of their everyday lives to do that. And for me, for every view that I get, think about how many people clicked on that video and started watching. Anyway, that's a whole video in itself, but point is, they're starting to, again, view other people as actual people and not just people in relation to when I see you and what I know of you. There's so much depth. As much depth as you see within yourself, there is that much depth within every single person you have ever met. Another thing is that they start to understand inner conflict and sort of the difference between inner reality and outward experience. This is a bit difficult for me to explain because I am still sort of trying to grasp that myself, but basically the difference between what's true for you and what's true for the world. So the way the world might experience something versus the way you experience it, and when that is different, it becomes very difficult to reconcile, and this stage is the stage at which people start to become better at that. And they also start to reconcile, and the big problem with the previous stage, the conscientious stage, is the difference between yourself and your relationships. So like how to maintain yourself within relationships. And this is a very difficult one that I've seen people struggle with, but how do I be myself when I'm in a relationship with someone? And this is the stage at which they get a lot better at that. But then the concern becomes with emotional dependence. They become scared of being too dependent emotionally on one person or another. Stage 8, I'm going to try and hurry this up a bit because it's already a long video, is the autonomous stage, which is when they sort of become more free from their regular worries. They've dealt with this concern for emotional dependence, and they've realized that, you know, it's inevitable. You're going to become emotionally dependent on people. You just need to deal with it, essentially. And here is when you finally reach the point where fulfillment is more important than achievement. You no longer want to be the best. You just want to feel fulfilled in whatever it is you are doing. They start to recognize the limits of autonomy, and again, that's something that I can't really explain too well because I'm not quite there yet. But the fact that you are autonomous, and so is everyone around you, is, you know, has its own limits. You can't do everything, I guess, is the way that I would word it. And they're, you know, better coping with their inner conflicts, with ambiguous struggles and situations, with conceptual complexity, and they're better able to integrate ideas. And I mean, sort of like how I took this idea and linked it to the Invisible Man, except you're more able to link abstract concepts, I suppose. Then, yeah, you become a lot better at dealing with abstract concepts in this phase, which is why it's a bit difficult to explain to people who aren't in that phase, or to talk for someone who's not in that phase also. And yeah, there's a big concern with autonomy here, so recognizing the limits of it, as well as learning to respect other people's autonomy. And a lot of conflict with the self and all of their roles and the limits of that. Like, I can't do this because I'm a mother. I can't do this because, you know, I have a very demanding job. I can't travel because of family. I can't do whatever. And they're sort of learning to deal with that as with their personality. Like, again, if someone has always had a sort of wanderlust, but they can't travel because of their job or family or money, then they have to reconcile that. And finally, stage 9, final stage, very rare, in fact. You may meet 1 or 2 people in your whole life who is in this stage. That is how rare that is. So, stage 8, about 1% of people, less than 1% I'd say, are in that stage, but this is like, you meet a couple people in your life who are in this final stage, which is integrated, fully integrated, where you completely can renounce the unattainable. It's impossible to be perfect, it's impossible to do everything, so forget it, not important anymore if I can't do it, right? And you can fully make peace with your inner conflicts. These people are described as having immense amounts of wisdom and broad empathy for themselves, for their surroundings, and for people, not just people they were close to. And they're more likely to cherish individuality, more than a couple phases earlier where there was the whole in-group, out-group problems. And they have, fully worked out their identity, which includes reconciliation to their destiny. So whatever it is that they're doing in life, they're okay with it. They are okay with the fact that they may never travel the world or do all of those things, and it's totally okay. And I feel like often people in this phase are very old, so they often also, with reconciliation to one's destiny, it's dealing with the fact that you are going to die someday, and that's terrifying. But people who have reached this level of wisdom are okay with that, or are becoming okay with it, rather. So, there you go. Those are all of the phases of ego development. I probably should have mentioned this disclaimer at the beginning, but it's very difficult to tell what phase you are in because it highly depends on what phase you're in. Because, if you are, say, in a phase where you think of achievement as to be very important, then you might think you are in a phase higher than you really are. Or if you're in one of the higher phases, you might not recognize exactly how high a phase you are in because of the nature of the phase you are in. So it becomes very difficult, and also because oftentimes people will have qualities of phases higher and lower than those they are in. But it's really just sort of an average. So someone may mostly be in a self-aware stage, but still have conformist tendencies, and, still have the whole in-group, out-group thing, but they will have, achieved, for the most part, self-awareness. And they might also, have similar conflicts as the conscientious stage, and they may be, again, becoming more aware of rules versus expectations, but they're still very firmly rooted in the self-aware stage. So, yeah, it becomes very difficult. So I would advise against trying to figure out too much about what stage you guys are in, because I know that's kind of a common problem, and there are actual tests that will do that for you. So, unfortunately, it is very difficult to find one. It's not exactly one that you can just take online. But there you go. Those are the stages of ego development and the path to true wisdom, I guess. So that is it for today. This is a very long video. Let me know if you reached the ending, because I'm curious as to if anyone would actually watch a 40-minute video of mine. But, yeah, that'll be it for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.